Welcome back, WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. We are all brought to you by our friends at Wise Markets, our Wise Conversations. We'll be telling you more about the Wise for School program this month. Also want to promote the Maryland Crab Cake Tour. We had a COVID snafu. Our mayor tested positive for COVID this week. We have moved the Crab Cake Tour from Coco's to Mother's at Federal Hill. Come on down, say hello. Lots of friends in my neighborhood. We'll get back to Coco's whenever the mayor tests out negative. As they say when they swab us in Owings Mills, think positive, test negative. It's all brought to you by the Maryland Lottery. Let yourself play. You know, I've been knowing this guy a long time, in the days of Craig Kelly and back in the Jim Mora era, when I used to have differences with the Brian Baldingers and the Tony Siraguses about this whole Indianapolis, Baltimore thing. I'm 53. I'm over it. I even get along with Pete Ward and even get along with James Irsay. So I can get along with Mike Chappell, whose work I read many, many times back when the Hoosier Dome was the epicenter of all things Colts. Mike, it is always a pleasure to check in with all my Indianapolis friends. I've had a few beverages in Broad Ripple amongst other places out there, but this time it's your turn to come in here. And this old Hatfield McCoy thing, it's just a game for me on Monday night, but it's always good to visit with you guys, especially when we're playing well and you guys aren't.
Yeah, because again, it's the Baltimore Indy thing. These players, I bet if we polled 53 players, most of them don't know the history.
None were born.
They weren't
Literally,
born.
none were born.
The last Colt player that was involved in that was Adam Vinatieri, and it's because he was so freaking old that he at least knew about the rivalry. But it's I still find that the one thing that really gets the ire more than anything of a Baltimore fan is if I say, hey, get over it.
Oh, I never say that to the Cleveland people
you stole a team from Cleveland, so what the heck's the difference? Well, there is differences. Those are weeds I don't want to get into, but there's still some fresh wounds from older people, but that's always going to be that way.
I'm an older guy, and I just decided, like, right after we went out to the Super Bowl there, and we were literally Billy Cundiff's field goal away from being involved out there, and it would have changed the trajectory of my life, given what I do for a living. I'm good with it. But I'll say this, and this is kind of fun. You'll appreciate this. Last Friday, I did the Maryland Crab Cake Tour, brought to you by the Maryland Lottery. Let yourself play at Nacho Mama's. We were in Towson, and I went in to set up, and the guy that owned the place died very tragically 9 years ago in a horrible biking. And he was a friend of mine. Everybody loves Scunny. He's a legend here. Anybody in Indianapolis, Google Scunny, because Scunny loved the Colts, but the Baltimore Colts. And the Bob Irsay dummy wound up in his bar because Sig had it and I had it in Indianapolis in '96, and he gave it a permanent home. And he loved Colt stuff. He had Colt stuff, Natty Bo stuff, Elvis stuff, very unique place, Oriole stuff all over the walls. And they have a second location. And I had not spent time in the second location. Mike, if you walk in there, it's the biggest part of the bar. COLTS, all autographed by Baltimore Colts. All the individual letters are up there. And I figured, very apropos that I was sitting there staring at that, waiting to see John Elway in Denver last week, and knowing that the Colts were coming. It all comes full circle, all of this thing. And I guess full circle is that the football team's not doing well there all of a sudden after – the Manning cast is doing better than the Colts are doing right now, Mike.
Yeah, it's one of those the perfect storm that's really conspired against this team. This is still a good – they were without 6 or 7 starters last week in Miami. Carson Wentz is playing. He's done 100% with the ankles. So it's been almost, not almost, but from the start of camp, we get there and Frank Reich misses the first week because he tested positive for COVID, one of those breakout cases. And then shortly thereafter, the center, Ryan Kelly, first things an elbow. Quentin Nelson needs surgery. Carson Wentz needs surgery. We almost get through training camp and T.Y. Hilton needs surgery. So it's been one thing after another, and nobody cares. You guys have had injuries. You guys mean the Ravens that running back and more. No one cares. They really don't. I can point to why they're 1-3. We knew it was going to be tough. They had just a brutal start, 5 games against teams with at least 10 wins from last year. So there's a reason for it. No one cares. So hopefully they're starting to get a little more healthy. But this will be a tough one Monday night just because of the matchup and the uniqueness of Lamar Jackson. But to get the win last week at Miami was huge, just for so many reasons.
Mike Chappell's here. He's out in Indianapolis, longtime coverer, right off of the Mayflowers, as they would say, from where my people come from, since 1984, covering the Colts. And, so many directions I could go in with conversation about the Colts. But, let's start at the top, and let's start with the Irsay family and the ownership and stability and Reich and who's running the place. I blinked a minute ago, and my buddy Chuck Pagano was there for many years, battling leukemia from there to here, and my wife's battle and all of that stuff. But, there's been a change there, and, what direction this goes in, that they bet in on Carson Wentz. Just some thoughts about leadership and whether that thing will ever look like it looked at one point where, every time you blinked, you look up and the Indianapolis Colts were 10-1.
Yeah, the one thing that nationally people need to understand, this is Jim Irsay, not Irsay. And it's I realize people in Baltimore, Bob Irsay is the one that they're fresh with. Jim Irsay's different. I realize he's an Irsay, but as far as leadership goes, they're diametrically opposed. He's done a very good job of putting people in place and, by and large, allowing them to do their jobs. Bill Pulley, Ryan Grigson. Now, there are times he steps in and says, how about if we do this? But he lets his teams do their job, lets their coaches coach. Stability's major. It takes pretty significant to have him in midstream, whether it's firing a coach or changing GMs and all that. So he really believes he's got the right people in place with Chris Ballard, Frank Reich, contracts, I think through 2025 or 2026. And they say they went all in on Carson Wentz. Might be a stretch, but maybe not, because he's got to be the guy, because they gave up a third and what's probably going to be a one next year, and they're tied to him for 2 years. The one thing you don't want to do, you just can't do, is every other year look to free agency to find a veteran who's available. It's just so hard to do. They got away with it last year with Phillip Rivers, but then he retires and you go Carson Wentz. It's not the way to do it. You need one of those guys that you can depend on. And Indianapolis was so spoiled through the Peyton Manning years, where, like you said, 12-4 was that's what you pointed for. And then you go from him to Andrew Luck, and he was the guy until he wasn't. And when he retired in 19, it really, really was a major setback that, to me, they've not recovered from as far as stability at quarterback. And if Wentz isn't the guy, which we'll find out, sometime next year, then I think they're in deep trouble.
Mike, you're a Hall of Fame voter, and you've seen a lot of things in this league, and we've seen Lamar disparaged because he doesn't look like the rest or walk like the rest. The offense certainly doesn't function like the rest. And the first time you see this sort of stickly looking dude running into linebackers wearing a number 8, crouching down in preseason games 4 years ago, you shudder a little bit. And here we are in all of the measurables, right? From passing, the rushing, to the effect on the league, to making the geniuses in the league have to play left-handed, literally with left-handed personnel in many cases, many weeks, especially once you get into depleted defenses where they can't do the things they want to do. And then the kid comes out and flicks it around last weekend like a passing offense, to the point where they have to get cheap yards at the end to get into triple digits to keep a meaningless streak alive. But for you witnessing this from afar and seeing where Lamar is, dude, you've seen it all. I'd love to hear your perspective on this, because like anybody that watched this a long time, the night they drafted him, I'm like, he's going to run into linebackers 12 to 15 times a game. They're going to play chicanery with the football. The ball's going to wind up on the ground. And oh, by the way, every team in the league doesn't think he could throw the ball well enough to do this. So that's where he came in. Now there's where he is, where it's getting harder and harder to argue the result.
The only I would go, and I want to see it next few years is will he take punishment where it takes a toll? Because he's getting a lot. He just is. Now in 5 years, that'll no longer be an issue. But I do worry about my quarterback getting hit that much. But as far as uniqueness, I mean, I was talking to the coordinator yesterday, Matt Eve, for us. A lot of teams have mobile quarterbacks. Many teams really build their running game around the quarterback. And I think that's what's unique about him. And he's outrushed the Colts leading rusher, Jonathan Taylor, which tells you his efficiency and productivity. So I wonder if it's sustainable, but it's sustained this far. And it's such a unique attack that I'm not sure you prepare for it from week to week, because you're not going to see that again later on. So it does force you to do things that you're not used to doing. Now, last year, remember, Baltimore came in here, and for the first half, the Colts had the answers. They shut down the Ravens pretty much, and I think they had the lead, and then second half it got away from them. And that's what this kind of an offense does to you. You can have the answer 60% of the game, and then when you don't, it costs you the game. You can be on point, 40 of the 60 plays, and then those handful of plays that he gets loose turns the game around. He's just unique. I don't know who to compare him with. Vic, he was more of a escape and make things happen. Lamar Jackson, he's a center point of everything they do, and I don't know who to compare him to. There's probably somebody out there, but it escapes my mind right now who might be like him. And somebody said, well, you need to get another Lamar Jackson. They don't come around like that. They just don't. So it's a unique challenge, and we'll see if the Colts are up for it on Monday night.
Also, while we're on the Hall of Fame thing, we have a kicker around here that eats the same fried chicken I do at Rofo, by the way. Luke Jones will be in Owings Mills all week with the extra day and a half to make you laugh playing Monday Night Football. Luke will be out all weekend long. Any breaking news brought to you by our friends at Coons Ford. That'll be on the Coons Ford text service. Of course, Dennis will be here on Thursday from 3 until 5 driving you home. But Justin Tucker and all the celebration last week, and, it's fun with memes and that. I still go back to Billy Cundiff changed all of that when we didn't get to Indianapolis for that Super Bowl low these many years ago. And the secret weapon and the value in the league, and we all play fantasy sports and who has value and all that. It really is amazing when you have the best kicker that no matter what, when it's 66 yards away, in cases where most teams in the history of the league would never try it. If they did, they wouldn't make it anyway. That it's actually happened here. The Ravens are really good at picking personnel, picking football players. They've proven that over 25 years. That is the special sauce that goes on here.
Yeah, it's funny, because it's funny. People sort of downplay kickers until you're changing guys every 3 or 4 weeks because your guy's not doing the job. And when you get Tuck, it's automatic. I mean, virtually, I don't know, I imagine 66 yards getting to be automatic. But for so many years, I mean, Adam Vinatieri was here for 14 years. Oh, by the way, after 10 years in New England. So during his heyday here, not to bring back a sore subject, but second round game in 2006 playoffs, was it 15-6 against the Steve
That was
McNair?
one of that might have been the darkest night in the history, because the Cundiff thing came after that. That was like the most disappointing night to be a Ravens fan. And look, we lost 3 AFC championship games, maybe 4. I got to go back and do the math. I mean, it was a hell of a lot of them. We were pretty good for a while. Or as Joe Flacco said, we win a lot of games around here. And Peyton Manning, but boy, that was a bad night.
It depends on which side you were. I thought it was pretty good.
Well, I mean, you stole our team, and then that happened. This call began friendly. You're about to reverse everything here, Mike.
just using facts. But back on the kicker thing, it's when you've got that guy. Again, it didn't end well for Vinatieri here. The last year was very, very rough. But keep in mind, Tucker's considered the best of all time now. Vinatieri, I still might put him there only because of postseason and some of the kicks he made. But still.
Well, Tucker has to do it for 10 more years too, right? Literally.
That's what I'm saying. Right. This is like comparing Peyton Manning and Tom Brady. Well, if you take one, it doesn't mean the other guy's trash. it means that you can 1A, however you want to do it. So I'm very curious how the Hall of Fame looks at Vinatieri. We've been very reluctant on special teams players. It took Morton Anderson several years. Ray Guy had to be a senior inductee. So in my mind, Vinatieri is a first ballot Hall of Famer just because. If he was anybody but a kicker, you'd say, of course. If this was a quarterback having his resume with comparable stats, you wouldn't even discuss it. But he's a kicker. So I hope he gets in right away. And then I hope we look at a Justin Tucker because, if we're going to say it's a third, and a third, then let's keep it that way. And when it comes times to talking about a kicker, a punter, Steve Tasker, we could argue forever about is Steve Tasker a Hall of Famer? He might have been the best to do it. Brian Mitchell. So Devin Hester, there's a lot of those guys. But your guy, I remember you guys came in here a couple of years ago with for scrimmage with the Colts up in Westfield, and a quality guy. And it's good to see kickers getting their due. But again, to really appreciate kickers like this, you need to not have that guy. And see guys just always the revolving doors at the kicker. And that's when you lose games that you shouldn't lose.
There's only been one idiot kicker in the history of the Indianapolis Colts, and Mike Chappell was there for that. It is interesting when your kicker has a personality, and certainly the guy here does. There's no, he sings, he sells soda pop, he's Mr. Texas. He might run for governor of Texas for it's all. Who knows, right? He might be the running mate down there. It is interesting that in your place there was once a brouhaha with your idiot kicker, right? You covered all of that.
Yeah, Mike Vanderjagt. He was one of the best until he wasn't.
He was a really good kicker.
He was until he fell off the table. He was really good. Vinatieri broke the all-time consecutive field goals at 44. Was what he said. Well, he broke Vanderjagt's record, which I think was 43 or 42, whatever it was. But that shows you how kickers are. When they lose it, they tend to lose it. But yeah, he was a personality. We had him, and then we had Pat McAfee as our punter.
Oh yeah, right. What a room that was.
It's crazy when some of your bigger voices from week to week was Pat McAfee. We had he and Vinatieri at the same time, and Vinny I really like Vinny. I really like him, but he was more understated, and he'd be standing there and watching watching McAfee do his locker room. Only place I'd been that the kicker, you got people around him trying to get his quotes because he was so good. And we're seeing now, post NFL, how good he is. But special teams, just when you think you can get by without special teams, you come up with a McAfee, a Tucker, a Vinatieri. You see how really important and consequential they are.
Remember when I was a kid, I used to look in the back of the card and see George Blanda's, 3 points and XXP and PAT and all of that. And yeah, I just think on a financial value, having the best kicker matters, and it's something everybody should want. Mike Chappell's here. He's out in Indianapolis. I could talk about the current Colts, and we got a game on Monday, and we talk some Lamar, and I could talk football with a guy over beers sitting in Circle Center Mall. We could sit there all night, or go get some of the special St. Elmo sauce and make my nose bleed. But I want to ask you about the Manning guys, because I don't know that I've ever talked to you much about it, because we're more luck era, you and me doing this thing together. But the Manning thing's amazing because, I remember being at the commissioner's party the night he and Ryan Leaf were there, and they were about to get drafted, and, Lee Steinberg's running Leafer, all of that going on 20. And it's amazing now. We're at the Hall of Fame level. We've made all the bread commercials, TV commercials, the brothers won Super Bowls, Moore, him, Ole Miss, all that stuff. Now this Manning cast thing is here. And I want to tell you, pitching commercials, all that, I haven't watched it, but you've spent hundreds of hours of your life sitting with Peyton Manning, either at a locker like I have with Ray Lewis, literally, right? If they're there long enough, you've just spent so much time, they're in your grill, and it's what we do for a living. The Manning brothers sitting around drinking beer, eating sandwiches, and talking football on Monday night. I don't know. Howard Cosell would approve of that, and I know you know Howard, so there.
It's funny. It's too bad they're not doing the Monday night game. I would love to hear Peyton's critique of this Colts offense and Carson Wentz. But I've watched it. I've got to tell you, and I think it's great. I think it's really great. The only criticism I would have is that it's hard watch the Manning cast if you're trying to watch the game, because they're not doing play by play. They're giving you back and forth and banner about certain plays and all this. So sometimes when I want to just watch the game, I've got to go over to the other cast. But in splotches, 15, 20-minute splotches, it's great stuff. I mean, the one that was just the greatest, they were doing the Ravens game with, I don't know, it was Kansas City, and they showed Jackson rolling out, and you hear Peyton say, throw it away. And then Jackson throws a touchdown to somebody in the end zone, and Peyton said, I'd have thrown that thing away 3 times before then. And that's what you get. You get the perspective of a quarterback that doesn't recognize the position that Lamar Jackson plays. And it's great insight. And I tell you, Eli's been really good with his insight. So it's worked. Again, if I tune in just for the game, sometimes I just want to watch the game. But what they do is outstanding. It's great insight. And this is one where, to me, more is better. And I don't know what went into the decision of, I think it's 10 this year. I think it is. But I wouldn't be opposed to more of the Mannings as opposed to less.
Mike Chappell's here. He is out in Indianapolis, Indiana. They're coming in for a little Monday night tussle. It used to have more meaning, but it always means something because they only play 17 of them now. We're not quite at the quarter pole, but we will be there around 9 o'clock on Monday night. I guess last thing for you on, big picture, Hall of Fame. You've been doing this forever. I've been doing this mostly forever since the Browns got here. Locker rooms being shut down, storytelling going away. And I don't mean to be like, old farty because you're probably a couple years older than me, but what do you still love about this? And what annoys the hell out of you about this? All of it. I mean, I don't mean the traveling or like even on the inside, but just 2 things. What you put it on, what do you love, and what turns you off the most about football? Because there's got to be something at this point.
Well, the stuff that turns me off, no access to the locker room, and not just after a game, but during the week. That's writers really make their hay. It's we all we need now. Podium with the coach 3 times a week. We get the quarterback once a week. We get players, the main players. We get access to players at podiums. But where beat writers really and columnists really make their hay is on a Thursday when there's nothing else going on, and you can just hang in the locker room and talk to guys and talk to them for 10 minutes away from the crowd, and you can really work on sources and work on stories over a couple of 3 days or a week. That's kind of gone away. And Mike, will we get it back? I don't know. I hope so. I know the pro footballers are really working on that. But my fear is that, as we've seen throughout the league, throughout the years, is when you lose something, a lot of times you don't get it back. We used to have access total to practices, 2 hours of practice. And some of us were dumb enough to watch 2 hours of practice. And now it's like 20 minutes of stretching before they go into teamwork. My concern is, do we get it back? I hope we do. I think the guys we have here are great, and they're working towards that. This will be made at the league level. And I'm afraid the league's going to say that this works to what we do with the limited access that we have now. We're back to where we're having, again, podium interviews during the week. They bring players into our press room, which we finally got back. But that's my biggest complaint. I still just love the game. I still love being around the players when we're around them.
That's the weirdest thing for me, dude. You've been doing it 15 years longer than me. I'm 26 years into this, and I've never met Patrick Queen. I've never met Calais Campbell. I know Lamar this much. He doesn't know who I am. Yeah.
We had the Phillip Rivers era, and we never met him. He was probably one of the best guys, from what I was told from the guys out with the Chargers, is he would stand there in the locker room for 20 minutes and just talk.
Same with Calais Campbell, by the way. That's the reputation for Calais Campbell.
Right.
Yeah.
And he was here 1 year during COVID, and we never met face-to-face met him. So that's the downside. At least now we're having face-to-face with Carson Wentz and DeForest Buckner, which is great. But you miss the intimacy of face-to-face and sitting there away. You let the TV guys get done, and then you can really get in and talk to a player when relaxed. I miss that. Not as much as the beat guys, because again, I'm a different I do, but beat guys and columnists, that's when they really make their hay, and they really have to work harder now to get that done.
Next year, we'll talk about gambling and injury reports and insider information and all the things that I talk about around here all the rest of the time. For now, though, we will enjoy Indianapolis at Baltimore, or Colts at Baltimore, which is always really weird. Mike, take care of yourself out there, man.
One thing is, do they put Colts, or is it going to be opponent? Do they just put opponent up there where the Indy would be?
No, I think they use the C word here. I mean, it's been 37 years. Get over it. Isn't that what they tell me when I come out there?
Yeah, I've used that phrase, and then I get bombed on Twitter.
You know what? It's all right. You get bombed on Twitter no matter what. Hey, we had to pick sides this week on them getting 5 cheap yards, or what I call harballing. So you can figure out what that is. And then Vic Fangio, whose reputation's impeccable in the league, really calls it out. And this becomes like fodder around here this week, but it is kind of crazy, you know?
Okay, but the only thing, again, they did that. They kept the streak alive for whatever the reasons. But the one point that Harbaugh made that was really accurate, because Fangio talked about player safety and all that. Well, he was thrown in the end zone with 10 seconds to play. There's more chance of somebody getting hurt doing that when you're down, whatever it was, two scores. You're not going to get 2 scores there. So you could say they were at risk, thrown in the end zone to accomplish something. So it depends on which side you are, on which view you agree with.
You know what's fascinating, because I know all the Deflategate began in your locker room and our locker room, and guys that didn't like Bill, and dimes that were dropped from Chuck Pagano's side, and like I got Kravitz later. I'll fish. We'll dredge up that dead fish before it's all over. But I had a former employee of mine on Twitter who tweeted out that this speaks to like Vic when he left Baltimore. Maybe he never liked that guy much at all, and it really, like, there's a lot of tentacles of
right.
It's more than Mangini and Belichick that didn't get along in this league.
We had a game back in the Manning area when both Dallas Clark and Reggie Wayne needed like 3 catches or 4 catches each to get 100 in the season. And what they did is they just threw these little bubble screens to Reggie and to Dallas Clark and got them their catches and got them out of the game. So I reasons for it. Whether the 100-yard rushing is that big of a deal, it apparently is to you guys, to the Ravens. So it just depends again on what what acts you have to grind and what you're trying to get done. But it is fun to watch from afar, these 2 grown-ups going at it like this.
Yeah, when they're pissing on Monday morning, right. You start peeling back the writer onion, right. And you're like, all right, that wasn't about 5 yards or a record,
right.
Mike, hey, I appreciate you, man. Take care of yourself. I hope we get back for a combine someday. I'd like to think I haven't. Yeah, I haven't had my last trip to Indianapolis or my last bowl of that cocktail sauce at St. Elmo's. Appreciate you, brother. Thanks for coming on. Always a great guest, Mike Chappell, joining us out in Indianapolis. You should follow him out on Twitter. I'm also going to have Kravitz on later this week. I got friends out in Indianapolis. Always great to visit with them. A big shout out to Dave Rather and our friends at Mothers for hosting us and the Maryland Crab Cake Tour on Friday under short notice because of COVID. And Mayor Scott, we're going to get him out a couple of weeks from now. You can find me Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, and of course at the ballpark on Monday night for Monday Night Football. It is Colts at Baltimore, as we like to say, opponents. We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore. We never stop talking Baltimore positive.